Rim shots are a critical drumming skill to master if you want to create a powerful rock groove that records well, sounds awesome, and pulls a huge sound out of your snare drum. But there's a problem. Rim shots are really hard to play consistently, where each one sounds and feels the same. If your rim shot backbeats are sloppy, leaving you with an unstable, amateur-sounding groove and an annoying, ringy snare sound, then today's lesson is for you. Follow these 5 simple tips for playing pro-sounding, ready-to-record rim shots so that your snare is sounding awesome, you're feeling like a capable pro, and your groove is feeling amazing. You can do this. Hey, welcome to The Non-Glamorous Drummer. I'm so glad you're hanging out today. I help self-taught beginner drummers know what to practice so that they can nail songs and be able to sound awesome playing with a band and be that drummer that other people want to have in their band. And hey, I've got a free gift for you. If you're dealing with a weak hand, if you notice that there's that galloping sound in your singles, and you have a hard time playing even fills around the kit, and all you want to do is just play smooth, quick fills, but the weak hand is crippling you and your hands are a mess. If that's you, trust me, I've been there. It's okay. We all start there. I've got a free e-guide for you in the description that's going to help you out a bunch. I want to help you solve your weak hand and build fast, fluid chops that you can apply to the drum set simply by practicing 3 daily pad exercises. If there were only 3 things you could practice on a pad every day, it's these 3 things. These helped me out a ton, especially back in my apartment days and my college dorm days. They will help you out too. Even if you're not constricted to quiet practice, these will be tremendously helpful. Help you really focus your practice down, eliminate that weak hand, get your hands even to where you're then able to play fast, fluid fills on the kit. Even if you've just got 30 minutes a day, you can really get a lot done with this. So be sure to go grab it. 3 daily pad exercises for fast, fluid hands in the description. My gift to you. So I remember this time. This must have been when I was in college, and I was playing at my church, and I even remember the song that we were playing. And I was playing rimshot backbeats, but the problem was the rimshot backbeats just weren't happening. I felt like I was playing them. I was trying to play them. I was trying harder and harder to play them throughout the song, but I kept flubbing them. I would occasionally miss the rimshot and like hit the center, so I still hit the snare, but it didn't sound as loud. Or sometimes I would only hit the rim, and it would just sound like a rim click, which was horrible because then it felt like there was no backbeat, and it's like we lost the groove for a second. And so it was just sloppy. I felt like a total amateur and was like, what is wrong here? I've been practicing my rim shots. I know how to do this. What is wrong with me right now? And then I realized there was one mistake I was making, one little thing that I needed to change. And when I made this one quick adjustment, it completely turned it around. And rim shots got way easier for me. So I'm going to be sharing with you today what this one adjustment is, as well as 4 other tips that are going to help you out a whole bunch too. We've got 5 tips total. These are things that I worked through that helped me a ton with getting my rim shot solid, and these have helped students of mine too. So follow these 5 tips and you will be well on your way to playing loud, consistent, and professional sounding and feeling grooves that sound awesome recorded. Because we have to ask the question, we kind of answered it at the beginning, of why are rim shots so important? Why is this such a critical skill? Well, if you want to play a powerful rock groove, and if you want to play anything loudly, and if you want to record well in the studio, you've got to be able to get a strong sound out of your snare that really cuts through the mix. Otherwise, cymbals will often be so loud that they're all bleeding into the snare mic, and your groove kind of loses its impact. It gets a little bit wishy-washy because there's so much cymbal going on and not enough powerful backbeat feel. It's kind of like this right here. I'll play you a couple of examples. If I'm going at it on the cymbal but not hitting the snare hard enough, here's what the groove feels like. We've got this nice ride wash, but that's all you hear. Versus if we do this. Suddenly the snare is way louder, cuts through way more, plus we've got all this full frequency depth out of the snare. When you play a rim shot, you get all the high frequencies, you get all the low frequencies, you get like this full spectrum of sound that sounds and feels awesome. And so if you're wanting to play powerful rock grooves, you need to be able to do this. And if you're playing anything loud, high energy, or you're recording, you really need to be able to do rim shots. And so if you want to be a versatile, well-rounded professional drummer, this is something that you need to do. Also, pretty much any rock record you listen to, is going to have rim shots on it. Like, especially if you listen to a Foo Fighters record from the 90s or a Killers record from the 2000s, you're hearing rim shots because those drummers are going at it and they're playing loudly, but you still hear, you know, a ka, ka kind of snare sound in the mix. If they weren't playing rim shots, you would have a hard time hearing that. And the engineer would be trying to crank up the snare mic here, but then there'd be all this hi-hat sound and cymbal bleed going in, and it wouldn't be any good. And so this is a key thing to mixing yourself well as a drummer and making sure that the drums cut through. The cymbals are there, but the cymbals aren't overpowering because the drums are nice and strong. And of course, learning to play rim shots will also help your dynamic consistency. I remember the biggest thing that it helped me with was paying attention to my backbeats. Even if you're not playing rim shots, even if your backbeats are just like this, all of those I was just hitting in the center. But what happens when you learn rim shots, you're forced to really pay attention to where your stick is landing and how hard you're hitting. You can apply that same mindset to when you're not playing rim shots. Then you start noticing, oh, this is how hard I'm hitting. Okay, I'm hitting right here versus right here. And so your backbeat awareness increases, and that's critical. So even if you don't like rim shots and don't want to play rim shots, learn to play them because the whole mindset involved and doing them well is going to carry over to non-rim shot backbeats, and it's going to help your playing across the board, even if you're playing in small rooms, where then you play cymbals even lighter, but you still keep your backbeat nice and strong. Because you're now aware of how hard you're hitting. And so those are just some of the indirect benefits that are going to happen. So without further ado, let's dive into this. This will be a lot of fun. 5 tips for pro sounding, ready to record rim shots. Step 1, tip number 1, optimize your snare height and angle. This is so important because if you don't get your snare where you want it, you're going to be fighting it constantly. You're going to be like wondering, why am I having to work so hard to play this rim shot? Because your snare is too high or too low. If you find yourself constantly going like this and just hitting the rim, odds are the snare's too high or it's too flat. If you find yourself having to awkwardly, go low to play the rim shot, and so you're always hitting in the middle and having a hard time going and hitting the rim shot, well, maybe it's just because your snare is too low or maybe it's too tilted toward you. And so just use common sense and sit there and evaluate, okay, is this comfortable? Is my snare where I need it to be? You have to do that. You have to figure that out. I can't tell you the perfect measurement. I do have another video here on the channel about just some guidelines for finding your perfect snare placement. I'll link it below. But I'm a different height than you are probably. My arms are probably a different length than yours. I'm about 6'4". I'm really tall and skinny. And so where I put my snare is probably going to be different from where you put yours. But just a guideline. I like to have my snare not too close. I don't like to have it way up here in between my legs because when your arm goes down when you play it, your upper arm needs to not be back or forward. Does that make sense? And so nice and relaxed. And so if you're sitting here and your sticks are at the center of the drum, your arms should not be like this. They should not be way back like this. And so just find that comfortable spot. And also I like to have my snare angled down about 9 degrees. I know that's oddly specific. I only know that because of the Measure app on my phone. If you have an iPhone, you can go to the Measure app and it has that level function. So you can just set your phone on the drum and you'll see exactly which direction your snare is tilted and by how many degrees. And so it's actually really helpful when I sit down at a house kit, I'll see, okay, is this a 9-degree tilt? Yeah, it is. Okay, close enough. Or if it's 8 degrees or 10 degrees, okay, close enough. I find that 8 to 10 degree tilt exactly toward my center is perfect for me if I have the snare at the height that you see it at right here, which is probably, I don't know, the rim of the snare is about 2 inches or so above my knees. And I'm sitting high enough that my thighs slope down. You want to make sure you've got greater than a right angle there with your leg. So your thighs sloping down and your leg is going out. You're not, crunched up here the way you're sitting. So there's so much involved in this, and I've got other videos about ergonomics and kit setup, and so be sure to check those out if you're brand new and you're just trying to get your setup where you want it. And you're like, Steven, hold on a second. I just need to get comfortable here and figure out how I need to sit. Okay, it's okay. You can pause and you can work on that. But something else that's important, and the reason why I put this in the thumbnail is because it's so important. A lot of drummers have a technique of coming down and hitting the rim shot, and when they hit the rim shot, their hand lands on their leg. And it is my opinion that you should not do this. A lot of drummers do it. A lot of drummers swear by it. But the problem with it, maybe the reason why I've had a problem with it is because if I'm hitting my leg every time I play a rim shot, my leg's gonna get bruised. Maybe it's because I'm super skinny, I don't know. Maybe if I were bigger, it wouldn't be as much of a problem. So you find out what works for you. But I do not advise doing that. Also because in order to do that, that means that you either need to sit kind of low or have your snare pretty high. Because if you look at where I'm landing, when my hand hits my leg right here, I still have like an inch, maybe a little less than an inch, to go right here. So my leg needs to be, down here, which could work, but I've also got my left foot on the hi-hat most of the time, so that brings my leg up. And really the biggest problem here, what if I'm doing leg bounce, eighth notes over here? What if I'm playing something like this? How's that supposed to work? If you've got your left leg over here doing stuff, then it's going to be at one point right here when you play an offbeat. It's going to be here when you play on a beat. That is not a reliable method. So unless you are a drummer who chooses to ignore your left foot and decide that I'm going to pretend my hi-hats don't exist and I'm going to keep my leg right here and keep my leg in exactly the same spot the whole song. I'm not going to move with the beat. I'm not going to tap my foot. Those are pretty much the things you have to do to make this work. That's why I don't know how so many drummers do make it work. And so I do not recommend it. I think it's a terrible technique and a bad idea to do that. So what is the better technique? Well, obviously some sacrifice has to be made, especially here in my case, because like I showed you, I can't play a rim shot if my sticks are in this position because of where I've got my snare position. I would have to go higher with the snare to be able to play rim shots with my hands out here. So instead, I opt to move my sticks to right here. Whenever I play a rim shot, I move my sticks closer to the 6 o'clock position. So if I'm playing singles right here and I go to rim shot singles, it might look like this. You can see I went to about 5:30 and 6:30, and that felt about right. So that's what I'm doing with either, whichever stick is playing the rim shots. Maybe it's the right. Maybe it's the left. And I do notice sometimes the butt end of the stick sometimes hits my leg. It's okay, it's not hitting enough to bruise it, and I'm not using my leg as a guideline. It doesn't matter whether or not it hits my leg. But I'm choosing to move my sticks into here so that I'm not running into my legs. That way my legs can be doing whatever they want to, playing as my feet should do, and my sticks can work independently of that. I'm not using my moving legs as a goalpost here. And so I recommend you do the same. Figure out what works for you. If you want to sit a little lower so that you can hit the rim shot in this position or raise your snare a little more, that's fine. You don't have to adjust exactly like mine, but I don't recommend using your leg as a guiding point here because we want to have that left leg free to bounce over here and keep time. Even if we're doing eighth note, like and time. Even then, we might have a good bit of bounce. So unless you're opting to only play heel down over here, which feels so rigid to me, I'm like trying to sit still instead of I want to get into the groove. And so that's the whole thinking behind my not wanting to land the left hand on the leg. Hopefully that makes sense. Whether or not I've won you over on that, it doesn't matter. You do what you want to do, but those are my arguments for that. And so that's the position I recommend you do. All right, so I know we spent a lot of time here on tip number 1, but this is definitely an important one because you want to get comfortable and feel comfortable doing your rim shots so that eventually you can do them with your eyes shut. But yes, there's a lot more to it. So tip number 2, mark the center of your snare. This is as simple as taking a stick, lining it up lug to lug, make a mark with a pencil, go lug to lug right here, mark until you have like this asterisk kind of thing in the middle of your snare, and then just kind of draw a circle around it. Now you have the middle of your drum marked, especially if it's a new head. That way you just have a guiding point. When you've got a brand new head on your drum and it's just this big sea of white, it can be really hard to know at first, am I hitting in the center? Because what can easily happen when you put a new head on a drum and you've got this big white clean head, over time you might be hitting a little bit off center and you end up making a dark spot there from all the hits, and you begin to see that spot as the center of the drum. And that's what happened to me for many years. I was landing like right here, kind of toward the lower left, which was kind of weird. I don't know why I was doing that. And so I didn't even realize I was playing off center because I never really looked at it. When you're always seeing your snare at an angle, you don't notice. And so I put on a new head and drew a circle and realized, oh, that's where the center is. Oh, if I hit the middle, I get more attack. There's less ringiness if I hit the middle. Okay, now I can be intentional. If I hit a little above the center, the rim shot's a little more impactful. If I hit below the center, it's ringier. If I just hit dead center, it's maximum attack and minimum ring. You start to notice those subtleties when you now know where the center is and can actually visually see where you're hitting and then listen to the results of moving your stick, a half inch that way or an inch that way. And so even though it sounds silly and amateur, don't consider yourself above this. I do this with every new head because it's so helpful to see exactly, okay, there's my middle. And then eventually the circle goes away. You can hardly see mine now. Eventually the circle wears away once you play a bunch, especially if you're doing brushes. And so, but then you've made your markings there in the middle. And so you've got your new guide point, which is where you've been hitting the drum. So that's simple. Mark the center of your snare. It'll help you out. Tip number 3. This is the one that I stumbled upon that Sunday morning. I was playing in my church and I was so frustrated by how badly my rim shots were going. I started looking at where I was gripping my stick, and I noticed I was gripping about right here. And that's where I was gripping my right stick. I was gripping both sticks the same way as I was taught in college music school. Hold your sticks the same way. Make sure, nothing's wonky here, like grip the same way. And so that's what I was doing. But I realized it's actually really hard to play rim shots well and consistently if you're gripping way up here. It's a lot easier to play a consistent rim shot if you're down here. Now, it's not easier to play fast and play quick flowing ride patterns if you're down here. Like if you're gripping down here, you're going to feel really caveman clumsy on the ride. So grip up here to play on the ride. But if you're playing rim shots, you're optimizing for throw, power, and weight. And you're going to have way more consistency without trying if you grip down here, versus you're going to have to try really hard if you're gripping up here. Also, bigger sticks. If you're trying to play rim shots with little 7A sticks, that's going to be frustrating. Even 5As, I find it more difficult to play consistent, boom, thuddy rim shots. If you go to a 55A, that's what these happen to be. Most of the time I'm playing with my 5Bs. 5Bs are even better for rim shots because you kind of just throw the stick down and it just sounds like a rim shot without really having to try because it has that natural weight and you're just letting gravity help you out. The heavier the stick is, the more gravity is going to help you with playing those loud rim shots. And then you can just grip further up with the right hand so you get that lighter feel. Because even with a 5B stick, you can get a much lighter feel just by gripping 2 inches further up. So those little changes there make such a difference. And I wish somebody had pointed that out to me. I had to stumble upon it after a whole bunch of frustration and realize, wow, that made a world of difference. So a question that you might have is, well, what if I need to, let's say I'm playing and I want to do something like this. Let's say I'm gripping like this with my right hand and I'm going. So let's say we go to a snare fill like that. Well, how are we going to play those right hand rim shots if we're gripping like this? This is where you have to be okay with shifting your grip on the fly. So what I did right there, as I reached over and came down here, as the stick's moving, I just let it slide out so that by the time I got down here, I'm down here and I'm ready to play rim shots instead of being up here and having to go try really hard and miss half of them. And so that's just something that you get used to doing, and it's a shift that's worth doing. There's no rule that says you have to grip both sticks the same way all the time. It's so much easier if you allow yourself to have somewhat of a dynamic grip where you change the way you grip according to what you're playing. And so make a habit of doing that. Practice going from this grip to this grip as you move back and forth. Yeah, it might feel weird, but eventually it'll become second nature. I promise it'll get easier. Tip number 4. If you've watched a lot of my videos, you know I'm not really a big gear guy telling you to buy stuff, but there's one thing that I've used a ton, and I would definitely recommend to any drummer to have. This is the Arton Black Hole. Tip number 4, use the Arton Black Hole for quiet practice, because the thing about practicing rim shots is that you can't practice them quietly, right? They're loud. I will show you tip number 5. I'll show you how to practice them more quietly on a snare. But if you live in an apartment, how in the world are you going to practice rim shots? You can't, unless you have something like this. I'm sure there are other practice pads out there that have a rubber rim, but this one's my favorite. I've had this exact pad right here for like 7 years. It's going strong. I've used it a whole bunch. Even the rubber rim doesn't seem to be wearing at all. You can change the tension of it. And by the way, this is not a paid product placement. This is not a sponsored video. I bought this with my money and I've used it a ton, and so I'm only gonna tell you to buy something that I've enjoyed using and that's really helped me. I have a whole set of these for the whole kit. Plus, you know, the cymbals with holes in them, so I've got the full practice rig if I need to play quietly. That can be super beneficial. It is better to practice your rim shots on this than not practice them at all. And so if you're serious about really learning the drums and logging more time on your kit, it is well worth spending the money to get really good quiet practice equipment like this, because these will help you out so much. This helped me out a lot too. And what I actually found was if I could play my rim shots well on this, it was actually a little bit harder to do a good rim shot on one of these than on the actual snare. So if I could do it consistently on the R-tom, take that off, play on the actual kit, and it felt effortless. And hard to say why that is, but either way, it's a great practice tool. If you can do rim shots on this, you can apply them to the snare. So I do recommend you get this. Check it out. You can find these. I love getting them from Sweetwater. They're my favorite company to order stuff from. And so go to Sweetwater, find the R-tom black holes, and if you want to outfit your whole kit, do. But if you've got to just get one, because they are kind of expensive, if you just get one for your snare, and then do something else for toms and kick. So those are super helpful. Tip number 5, though, ideally you practice your rim shots on the actual snare drum at some point. You can't just practice on the quiet setup and expect it to 100% be the same. It's still a little bit different, even though that'll help you a ton. What you can also do, practice with snares off so that you can hear the quality of your rim shots better. What I started doing when I first got intentional about practicing them, I would fold a towel or a bandana or something like this over the top third or so of the snare drum, just to muffle it. Honestly, this isn't going to muffle it a ton because it's just a thin bandana, but we'll put the jingly thing there. So kind of muffle it down, turn the snares off. That way there's no ring, and all we hear is attack. What's cool about this is it means that we can really hear how consistent or inconsistent our rim shots are. Like you can hear right there as I go from rim shot to only hitting the rim. Right there you can hear how it kind of starts to lose that depth. Or if I'm leaning more towards center than rim, you hear more of the doom, 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 the tone from the drum there, and then you get more of the attack as I go to here. So you start to notice those subtleties, and you can get really intentional about, okay, do I want to play a little above the center? That, or do I want to go a little bit below the center? You get a more rim kind of sound there, or do I want to be right in the center? What's the difference between being rim heavy, that's very rim heavy, or more center heavy? And so you can get crazy with this. This is why every drummer's rim shot sounds slightly different. And you know, one drummer might hit the same snare drum as another drummer, but they get a totally different sound. This is why. Because there's so many places you can hit, so many ways you can hit, different sticks you can use. And so there's really no limit to the amount of variation here, but you start to notice these tiny little differences when you turn the snares off, muffle the top, and you can even unmuffle the top to then hear the amount of ringiness and know whether or not you're off center. But either way, this is a much quieter way to practice the rim shots so that it's just not as loud and in your face. I definitely still recommend having some ear protection in as you're practicing. That might be really helpful. But this is a great process for how to actually practice them. Sit here and just go like this over and over again. And so we're gripping down here near the butt end. We're hitting in the center. We're paying attention to visually where are we hitting? How is it sounding? We've marked the center of our snare so we know if we're there. We've got the snare at the right height, right angle. We're constantly tweaking that, and then it's just a matter of logging the time and the repetition of just doing this. And then turning it into a groove. And then practicing with the right hand too. So take action on these tips, patiently practice this stuff, because that's the one thing I can't really say enough, that you have to practice this. Yes, you can follow these tips. These are really cool kind of hackish things that'll help you do your rim shots better very quickly, but you also have to spend the time doing this over and over again and paying attention to what you're doing visually and aurally, matching up what you're seeing with what you're hearing, and doing it so much that it becomes muscle memory. And I promise, once you do that a whole bunch and apply it as you're playing songs, and as you're practicing anything, decide, hey, I'm working on this groove for coordination. I'm going to choose to play rim shots. Just do it a ton and you will get so good at it and it'll become a second nature habit, and you won't have to think about being consistent and doing it. It'll just feel natural, I promise. You'll get there. You'll have consistent, even, loud rim shots that cut through the mix and pull an awesome sound from your snare so that you're feeling capable, professional, and creating great feeling, pro-sounding grooves. So, question for you as you go. Do you like playing and hearing rim shots, or would you rather play dead center? I know some drummers have a strong opinion on this, and they're like, I don't like rim shots. I think snare drums sound better when you just hit them in the middle. And hey, that's valid. I think every drummer should be able to do it both ways. You should be able to hit it really hard and hit a rim shot if you need to, or just stay in the center, because it all depends on what room you're playing in, how loud you need to be, what song you're playing, what sound you want, how the drum's tuned. So many variations, and it's not black and white. There's no rule one way or the other. But tell me, what do you like? Do you like the sound of the center versus the rim? Like I said earlier, though, even if you don't want to play rim shots and don't like the sound of them, practicing them will help you become much more aware of your dynamics and the sound you're getting, so that your backbeats, even if you play in the dead center, will sound a lot better. So take action and do it. And hey, before you go, don't forget to grab that free e-guide, 3 daily pad exercises for fast, fluid hands, so you can overcome your weak hand. If there were just 3 exercises to do on your pad every day, if you've just got 30 minutes a day, it would be these 3 that'll help you so much with balancing out your hands and being able to then apply that to the drum set for fast, fluid fills that aren't crippled by a weak hand. So be sure to check that out, especially if you're a beginner. It's going to help you out a bunch. My free gift to you, total no-brainer. All right, thanks for watching today. Thanks for hanging out. This has been a lot of fun. I hope this has been valuable to you. Be sure to come back next week. We've got a video every week. And as always, know that you can do this. Stay non-glamorous.